Hey everyone, Matt West from Hawk AeroSafety, and this is the Hawkeye AeroSafety podcast. We've been working on this for a while now and trying to get into a bit more of a cadence. I'm delighted to have a friend and a expert in the UAS industry, Lamar Ellis, with me today. Lamar, it's great to have you on.
Oh, Matt, it's so good to be with you, my friend. I've been so excited about being on this podcast. Thank you.
And Lamar, so we know each other through AUVSI initially, right? We got introduced when I started as the new chapter president up here in Colorado for the Rocky Mountain chapter. And how long have you been in your role down there at the Georgia chapter?
As the president since 2021, and I was actually the president of the Atlanta chapter. But we discovered that nobody in the state of Georgia outside of Atlanta wanted to be a member of the Atlanta chapter. So after California changed their name from the San Diego chapter to the California chapter, I went, oh my gosh, that's what we have to do. And so now our chapter has grown immensely just due to the fact that people want to be part of the Georgia chapter of AUVSI. Been a lot of fun. Yeah.
And so you wear a lot of hats, right? I know I'm a busy guy, but you are the busiest guy I know. Absolutely. So not only are you the chapter president, you're also an FAA safety team drone pro, and you also run your own company as well.
Yeah. It might sound like I'm doing a lot of stuff, but I'll tell you this, when you love what you do, it seems like you're never working. I just get opportunities to talk to people all over the place. In the UAS industry, as you well know, is growing so fast, and there's so many really interesting people that have entered this space that we're all dreamers. And, it's happening for us, and it's starting to really start. So I'm excited.
I'm so excited. I mean, we just got back from Exponential not so long ago, and seeing what all the chapters are doing, but seeing how the industry is now up and moving quickly. From before, I think we were kind of used to the pace that technology was always outpacing the regulation. But now, with all the changes going on, the FAA is now being very progressive and things are moving forward a lot quicker. We're looking at Part 108 for Beyond Visual Line of Sight coming up here, hopefully pretty soon. And those changes are going to be huge on kind of the mass market. I'm very excited to see how that occurs. But where it comes to, let me jump back a second. So let's talk about your business too. So what was your first foray into drones and UAS? How did that start?
It actually just started with a news report, and it was 2014, and we just celebrated our 11th year. I was down at the beach with my grandfather. He always had cocktails before dinner and would watch the local news, and somebody had a Phantom 4. And they took the Phantom 4 from the front of this big house to showcase security and privacy infringement, the girls in the back of the pool. And so they took the drone up, and my career has been in real estate. And when I saw the house from the different perspective, it changed everything. And I actually looked at my grandfather at that moment. I said, this is what I'm going to do with my life. And I really had no clue as to what. I just knew that I wanted to get into the industry, and as you well know, it's so inviting to get involved in it, but it's kind of hard to stay in it if you are tunnel visioned and narrow-minded in your approach. You kind of have to be kind of expansive.
And did I ever tell you how I got into drones?
No, how'd you do it?
So It was funny. I'd seen them come around the early days of DJI. It's funny you mentioned the Phantom 2, because my story actually involves, Phantom 4. My story involves a Phantom 2. So I was, as you know, I was formerly a police helicopter pilot down in for the Fontana Police Department, San Bernardino County, California. And we were doing a public event where we were to land in a park and they had a big showcase of the police department. They had the SWAT team, they had the dog handlers and everything. So
Yeah.
obviously my suit pressed and dressed, we were coming in. I polished the aircraft. We're coming in to land at the park. Nice high reconnaissance coming in to land. Power lines, I'm very cognizant of people and everything. I'm like, this approach is looking good. This is going to be good on camera down there. And then out of my eye, I saw on the left something white hovering there. And it was someone with a Phantom 2 right by my landing site as I'm coming in to land. So, that was my very first encounter it's my first time seeing drones in reality. I went around, and then it was also the first time I saw people respond differently to drones. So I said to my observer, can you get the guys on the ground to, get that drone out of the air? But the transmission that went to the ground via radio was get that down. So they rugby tackled the guy who was controlling the drone. But that doesn't help me. The drone is still now hovering over the LZ. So
Right.
sorry, that's my little aside there. That's my first encounters with drones. But no, I mean, one thing for me is just the amazing progression since what seemed like yesterday. Those early days, we were very limited automation. We were lucky to have stabilization on the drone. It's funny, I've got a Phantom 2. I pulled out of the basement the other day, and I was like, oh, how did I fly this thing? Now I've got 18 layers of stability augmentation, and it can make anyone look like a movie pro filming from the sky. But the progression has been so quick, and now I mean, in terms of technology now, what were your biggest takeaways from Expo this year from Exponential?
Exponential was a lot different than it had been in the past for me, because there's now this brushback with the different types of drones in the countries that are using them. So we didn't have a lot of drones showcased at Exponential. There was a lot of sensors. There was a lot of military style drones, and they even had the Whisk aircraft, which I was really happy to get up in there and get a chance to sit in that thing. But Exponential's really growing, but every year it's a little bit different. I was hoping to see a lot of the new drones on the market. Back in 2024, there were a lot of opportunities to see a lot of different brands and varieties. I don't know what the future holds. I think that here in Georgia, we've got at our next chapter meeting for the AUVSI, we've got some Ukrainian companies that are coming in. And the Ukrainians, oh my gosh, their technology lasts about 45 days before they have to redo all their systems to keep up with what's going on in their environment. But their manufacturing capabilities are amazing. And so we're going to try to get, we're making a major push here in Georgia to bring manufacturing. So you're seeing a lot of new players that are getting into the market. It's exciting. It's exciting times. I really like the fact that we had those executive orders from Donald Trump come down on June 6th. We're still waiting on the beyond line of sight stuff. And as a matter of fact, I had a conversation about that this morning. There are a lot of big companies out there that are waiting to see when we can fly beyond line of sight.
Yeah. And that's a whole different market segment too, right? So, I mean, the Part 107 market exploded as soon as the regulation opened up for that, right? So, especially from say your segment, real estate, suddenly this whole new avenue was open to people where there was restrictions before, or there wasn't an ability to do it that wasn't cost prohibitive. When it comes to Part 108, you're talking about a whole different market of companies and organizations that's going to open the pathway to. Like, from before, a previous company I worked with was doing medical deliveries, and we were doing the test cases in Kansas, flying beyond visual line of sight between facilities under all these exemptions and waivers to Part 107. But still, it was very clunky in the way we had to try and attempt that, because there was no set path to do that. It was exemptions and waivers and finding the best safety case to do it. And in the end, the initial flights were done by chasing it with a helicopter. Which was
Oh
is kind of
no.
insane to me, right? We're
Right.
we're trying to find something sustainable and cost effective, but here we are using a multi-billion-dollar helicopter to chase a drone. But it's a very exciting time. I just got back yesterday from a visit to Choctaw Nation, their emerging aviation site up there with James Grimkley, which was absolutely wonderful, wonderful team up there, and huge test site. I think 44,000 acres. Um, and I'm deathly afraid of snakes, and they're kind of happily telling me there's cottonmouths in every bush and in every pond, and um, but again, just seeing them ramp up ready for these organizations, both military and civilian, to do testing out there and long distance. It's a very exciting time. I cannot wait for that. And once the comment period comes due, people like us are getting busy, right? Then it's going to be all the comments on that, listening to our members, in our chapters, local organizations, and hoping that the the regulations go in a direction that supports growth, and really supports what we need in terms of um, the manufacturing technological aspects too, I think.
Yeah, my biggest fear with 108 is I think there's a big misconception on it. And that is everybody feels like once 108 is out there, everybody can use it. And I think that we're still gonna be in a testing phase of maybe the larger corporations will get a chance to use beyond line of sight, and those that have proven themselves, the ability to fly beyond line of sight. But I don't think it's gonna be an open market for everybody to jump into.
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not. And and you're absolutely right. And I think that's a job on us as an industry to make sure we're properly educating people as well on that, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of fear from those who don't understand it, who aren't in our world, who aren't operators of UAS, and just thinking that just because Joe next door is using his drone for real estate photography, he's not going to be sending it to the next county anytime soon. And again, we were talking about that on my visit up to the Choctaw Nation, as well, around there is a lot that's going to be in there around things like safety management systems, how are we actively managing risk. And there's going to be lots in there that are barriers of entry to individuals and smaller organizations, I think. But when you're doing those kind of operations, the level of risk is that much higher anyway. So you need to have those in there, and I think there's going to be. I'm expecting there to be a lot more language in there. It's going to be quite restrictive, but yeah, I'm sure it's going to be coming out here shortly. They already missed the deadline, didn't they, for bringing that out? So, your guess is as good as mine. Are you a gambling man?
No, no, actually, that's one thing I'm not good at, is gambling. I will say this, when it comes down to it, I've heard so many different opinions on the 108, and that is there are some people out there that are saying we need to scrap what has already been introduced and rewrite the 108 because there is no ADSB. The remote ID is typically Bluetooth, whereas in Europe and Canada, they are networking it through the cell phones. There are some things that we have to address to make this really happen for everybody. And I think the big argument has always been cost. Nobody wants to incur more cost. Everything they want is free and they want the best systems. But I think we're reaching a point now where we're going to have to take a step back to get it right. And what I mean by that is that, you're talking about air taxis and air delivery services, along with, small unmanned drones, along with helicopters, balloons, gliders, skydivers. That is such a conflicted airspace. And I think that the small UAS has really had some benefits of getting out there and testing the market. But now when it starts to get to a bigger league, I think we're gonna see a little more restrictive environment for you just can't go and buy a drone and jump into the industry like you could.
Yeah, I agree totally. And it's interesting you were talking about, Canada and Europe. With a previous company, I was helping them out, and they're bringing in a drone system from Germany. It was the Wingcopter, 2 meter wingspan, kind of electronic vertical takeoff and landing system. And it was the first time I'd heard the term FLARM. Have you ever heard of FLARM? I
Yeah.
kind of got sideswiped by this, and they were like, "Yeah, we use FLARM to deconflict," and I was like, "I've never heard that." And they
Now,
said, "Oh, it's been in aviation a long time." Well, I was a helicopter pilot. How have I not heard of this? And so apparently, it's a technology that's used a lot in their gliding sector over there to separate gliders and to identify. It's like a lower version of ADS-B, and I'd never heard of it before. But then the Wingcopter, when we brought it across here, had ADS-B in and out too. But again, there was reticence on the part of the FAA for us to have ADS-B out turned on, which, it's a good method of deconfliction. But I remember one of my previous roles, previous jobs was flying helicopters in the Grand Canyon, and uh, lots of helicopters out there. And I remember the day we suddenly had, ADS-B in turned on our beautiful Garmin glass cockpit displays. And it was shocking because suddenly you realized how much traffic was out there that you never saw before. And, I think if we do need something better than remote ID, I think it was a necessary step. And we all knew that it wasn't as robust as it could have been. But I think it was a good first step. But I'm interested to see the next steps, once we get to, traffic management solutions and those kind of things. But with me having one foot in the uncrewed world and one foot in the crewed aircraft world is vigilance, right? You're monitoring so many systems in the helicopter. I want some additional aid here in identifying where a UAS system is. If I'm an air medical pilot or a police pilot, if for ADS-B, most of the aircraft I've flown have had that capability on the ADS-B in. If there was a solution in my mind that was smaller for ADS-B for all drones, that'd be fantastic. But again, I'm not an engineer. I don't know how that looks, but I think that's definitely going to be the next steps in consideration for that.
I just can't imagine what it must be like at the ATC to see all the drones and all the planes and everything else in the airspace at the same time. It's just got to be maddening.
Hmm.
Especially here in Atlanta, we've got the busiest airport in the world, and so that's I can't imagine when they're spotting drones also in the sky
And and
broadcasting.
and again, I mean, even though they have the best systems, how much do they not see too? Is my
Oh yeah,
thought. And
it's it, I'm working with my fast team program manager here, and we're actually putting on an event in August talking about airspace confliction because he gets phone calls from pilots every day talking about drones that are 3,000 feet up in the flight path of aircraft that are coming into land. And he was so frustrated one day that he had maybe 6 or 7 phone calls before 11 o'clock. And he called me and he said, let's put on a program. Let's try to get this, at least talked about.
yeah.
That's the thing that I really upsets me about some of the people that are flying in the industry is that I think they know the rules. They just don't follow them.
Hmm.
And
And
it's not a matter if.
and we've spoken about that over a coffee or two in our time too, right? About the fact that there are people out there that it doesn't matter if there's regulation or not. And these are, we're not saying companies, we're saying, usually private operators who, acquire a drone and they won't be told what to do. Then there's the element of the group that just don't know, that are just
Right.
misinformed or ill-informed, and they want to be a better drone operator. They want to be diligent in their safety actions and such. And then you've got, usually once it gets to more of a business, a medium or large size company, they understand risk management, right? They understand that's not just crucial for good business, but it's crucial for being a player in the industry. And how does that work? I mean, could you just explain the FAST team for just in case people don't know what that is, and how your interactions work with the US group?
Okay, for the FAST team was created to give people that are outside of the FAA an opportunity to work with their peers. So I was brought in. The way I got in with the FAST team was back in 2014. The very first seminar I ever gave, I had somebody in the room that's husband was an airline pilot. She freaked out. I was talking about drones. I was talking about them flying in the airspace. She started to worry about her husband's career and his safety because of drones. So she turned me into the FAA and to say, "Hey, you can't have drones in the sky." She pulled a Karen on me. And so I ended up waiting to speak with the FAA. I invited them to my next webinar. And because of my affiliation with working with them and then talking about safety and giving classes on safety, back in 2019, when they started up the FAST team for drones, they considered me as a candidate. And I got to tell you, it's a lot of fun to go out there and to represent the community. But what the FAA does see is that it's when they first introduced the FAST team for aviation back in the 70s, they saw a reduction in accidents because now you had, instead of the FAA coming in and talking to you, you had somebody like myself. I'm a pilot. I'm also involved in the industry. I want to see the industry done safe. I'm not going to come in there and hammer on you and tell you, oh my gosh, you need to be out of the skies. You're a horrible person. It's more on the lines of education. And so I'm hoping that if I educate somebody, they'll turn around, they'll educate somebody else, and maybe we'll get like a geometric kind of effect of people talking to each other in the industry and sharing the knowledge and maybe making this a safer industry. So, and I know I've talked to you, so I'm hoping that I could get you on the FAA safety team soon because I think you'd be a great candidate because you talk about safety all the time.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I know. I'd love to. I have to reach out. I mean, yeah, and I talk safety all day. That's the job, right? But I, but we enjoy it, right? And I think any chance we get to help educate, and a lot of it is just awareness. Like you said, there's say in my neighborhood, for example, anytime that I have my drone out, people come up and they're asking questions. I'm trying to educate and let them know, you know, what right looks like. I think
Mm-hmm.
is a big part of it, because some people just are completely unaware of the risks. They will walk straight up to it if they could, or some people have views in completely opposite direction. I just think they should be all banned and everything like that, and everything in between. But any chance we get chance to share our knowledge and get people excited, I love going to schools and doing educational events, and any chance to talk about the craft. And but, I always got excited by helicopters, but drones are way more accessible and approachable for the
They are.
majority of the public, right?
You talked about schools. I've actually had parents come up to me after I've given a presentation at a school, and then their kids are telling them about the rules, telling them, that, hey, this is what's going on in the industry. So it is amazing how influential it is when you talk about safety and talk about doing it right, how that it has legs in the community. So, and if there was anything that I wish that this podcast would maybe uh, accentuate or make more aware is that we're all in this together. And, if there's an accident and you could have had a chance to prevent it by giving somebody some knowledge or sharing some, what the rules are in the airspace, uh, you can prevent a lot of the bad things that are going on in the industry, just by, you know, being an advocate for it. You don't have to be on the FAA safety team.
What I'll do is I'll add onto the video as well the URL for the fast team. I think that'd be great to share
Oh, yeah.
that information. So remind me of that. I'll make sure we do that as
Okay.
well.
I will.
Uh, so let's pivot a little bit and let's talk about your company. So I know you've been an educator for some time now in the UAS space. Tell us a little bit about that.
It started with, like I said, the education. I am an appraiser. So I've got all the designations to appraise everything from the Empire State Building to the outhouse behind your house. So I in that once I saw that news report and got into drones, I started to float the idea around in the real estate industry. And everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, this is great. Can't wait for it." I got scared. I thought I was going to get run out just by having the idea. So, but that hadn't been the case. So I wrote a class. I worked with a company here in Atlanta called Flyworks. Roman Mola, a tremendous company, absolutely the best. He came in and he filmed a lot of my initial projects for me for my classes. And as you well know in education, your first class is not going to be as good as your last class. Yeah, you're still learning. You're wanting to get the questions, and so, yeah, I've done education now for 11 years, and I am now moving into consulting because
Oh, fantastic.
I finally realized that consulting is the exact same thing as educating, but just taking it onto a bigger scale.
No, absolutely. But b- so the consulting is going to run parallel with the training.
Yes, yeah, because it's essentially the same thing.
Hmm.
It's everything that I've been teaching anyway. I just didn't realize that you called it consulting. I thought you called it educating. So, there's a huge market out there for people that want to learn, and it's not just the pilots; it's the end user also, because end users don't realize that they can be culpable for any kind of accident that their remote pilot might have. I had a situation where I was doing a fair one time, and our company was out there at the fair, and a rival drone company was out there in the fair. I was horrified. The guy was flying over people. He was catching his drone would be firing. The propellers are going. He's showing people the drone 2 feet from their face. I was like, oh my God. And it just, uh, and at the time, I was so taken aback. And when I approached him, you would have thought I had just slapped his mother. He was ready to go to fist on that, and um, but that's the kind of industry that we had back in 16. Now I think people are getting a little more aware. They realize that the rules are out there, and uh, if I've had to approach somebody, I've not really ever had anybody get upset in the fact of, "Hey, let's go to battle." They more lines listen. But I will say this, I don't try to interrupt anybody while they're in flight. I'll
Mhm.
say, "Listen, can I talk to you after you land?" Because, I don't want me to be the cause of them having an accident.
Absolutely. Yeah, safety of flight's crucial. But don't you think that in the lack of, well, the worst term is policing of what we do, but in the lack of there's not a lot of oversight in what we do. Don't you feel that it's on us as industry professionals, as a wider group, to have it more safety influence like that, and to guide those people? I mean, that's kind of my view.
Oh, in my view too, but I've run into an issue in the last couple of years because of the lack of enforcement and the amount of social media that's out there of people that are showcasing, flying beyond line of sight over people, doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing with a drone. It's influenced a new breed of pilots that uh, they'd rather be ignorant so that they can continue to do what they're doing. So, the FAA is not an enforcement organization. They're the ones that are, tasked with making a safe airspace. But the police departments and fire departments or all those that would be going out there to enforce these rules don't really know what tools they have. And
Mhm.
so we're in a state of flux. I think that it's all going to change in the near future. So yeah, I recommend to everybody that's out there that might be watching this podcast, start flying correctly because you don't want to have your name on the naughty list. Because eventually it's going to have to come down to, they're going to have to figure out who's flying right and who's not.
And I think it's important as well to think about this as this isn't just a UAS problem, right? You've got unscrupulous operators of helicopters and planes, and there's in every kind of sector there. You've got the same thing. I mean, I've seen so many reports out there of similar things happening in the helicopter world. People taking aircraft who've, had their pilot's license revoked years ago or multiple times and still going and flying helicopter. Honestly, it's wild, but I think it's just because the barriers to entry of in drones is so low. Anyone, my neighbor can go next door, to Best Buy and go pick up a drone, go take the test and be a Part 107, certificated professional,
Yeah.
um, and never touched a drone before. That's very odd to me as a pilot, as a crew pilot. I dedicated 3 years of my life and a lot of money to becoming a helicopter pilot, and look
Yeah.
at me now. I'm flying a desk, um,
Yeah.
but I think I love how accessible drones are to everybody. It's, okay, if you want to have a very expensive and cool drone, you need some more money, but the majority of people can access, something pretty good and easy to fly, but for relatively cheap and set up their little business. Uh, but as an industry, the one thing that I'm striving to help and help drive the message on is professionalism. And
Yeah, me too.
I know we all are, but that's what we're aiming for. And the greater majority of pilots want to achieve that too. They don't want to be seen as a crappy drone pilot, especially if you're in business. You don't want to be seen as the bad one of the group. Um, so
You won't
I
last
think,
long. There's no way you'll
yeah,
stay in the business that now. There's way too many good pilots.
that's it. And I think as the industry matures, you're going to see that more too, right? It's
I
more
hope so.
voluntary codes of conduct and things like that. By holding yourself to a higher standard, it can only do good for both your organization and the industry.
Yeah, the thing I don't want is the industry to get shut down or pushed back just due to the fact that we've got somebody who's a knucklehead, goes up there and does something stupid. And um, the biggest fear I have with the drones is that they can fly themselves. And so people don't spend the time to train themselves on the sticks. They allow the drone to do a lot of the work for them, but it's that day when the drone decides to go on its own or act up, and I've had plenty of those happen, and if it weren't for the experience and training that I've got, fortunately, I haven't had, a situation that I've lost data for my clients or had a crash. But I have been in situations that have made me just, I wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat going, oh my God, how close. So,
What's the phrase? A calm sea never made a good sailor.
yeah,
It,
exactly.
and I still think back to when I was learning to fly helicopters. My instructor, it'd be what I thought was blowing a gale. Now I know it wasn't, but it was way outside my comfort zone. But my instructor said, "Grab your headset, we're going flying." And I thank him for it now because you were training under those conditions and you were training for the emergency you hope never happened, or the conditions that never happened. But you want to train in the time of peace when you've got the opportunity to, you know, test those limitations out. And I think emergency procedures and general care of aircraft is something I see a lot of weakness in with a lot of drone operators. Can pull it out of the box, throw it on the ground, and launch it without even doing a. I know I'm used to walking around a big helicopter, but a proper walk around, making sure that the motors are spinning freely. There's no gritty noise, that the props are properly attached, that everything's as it should be before having to try and deal with a problem in the air. It's better to deal with it on the ground, right?
Well, not only that, it's that, they will, as much as I see the inspections going, they'll remove the gimbal clamp off the camera. They'll make sure the battery's secure, their SD cards in, and they'll separate the propellers if they have to. And then they'll just fire it up and send it off.
But in reality, how many times have you and I both launched without a memory card on board the aircraft?
Oh, it's happened.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, it's
Yeah.
happened. But sometimes, I don't know what your thoughts are on this. We were talking around this. I was talking with an instructor friend of mine, a helicopter instructor, saying there's some things that you can't practice for. Sometimes you need something to happen to you for it to become active. Do you know what I mean? Like, sometimes you need something to have happened to you for you to now focus on that, and for it to become habit.
Oh, yeah. I am never going to brag that I am the best pilot in the world. I've made my mistakes out there. And some of the stuff, that they train you, to don't get so excited and don't show off and things. I've fallen into that category when I first got started.
Yep.
And I, as I've progressed and I see the value in what the services I'm providing, the more skills and professionalism that I'm starting to bring into what I have done.
Mhm.
Like the very first drone I bought was a little tiny toy drone, and I never even bothered to read the instructions. I plugged the battery in after I charged it. I actually was so stupid, I set the drone backwards. And so when I launched it and I had the sticks going forward so it would go flying away from me, and it flew and hit me straight in the chest. And I was like, okay, okay. And that was really I bought the drone as soon as I got back from the beach. That was like a week after I'd seen that news report. And I was like, okay, this is a lot more serious. And
Yeah.
so, yeah. So I've been blessed in making realizations. And then also you've got your friends that are flying too.
Mhm.
The worst pilot I've run across was somebody that was a Black Hawk helicopter pilot. Worst drone pilot I've ever flown with. He took my drone and slammed it right into a tree. I was like, "What the hell?"
I think, but having a buddy, having peers doing the same thing, and you check each other. Like, I've got a great colleague of mine who's a aircraft maintainer, but an incredible drone pilot, and we worked a lot down in Arizona with the operation I was telling you about before, where I was working down there. And he would check me and say, "Matt, you're better than that. Remember, take it slow, hover check, make sure everything's working good." And it'll be little things like that. You hold each other accountable, because otherwise the temptation is, I don't want to use the term "send it" because I hate that term, but you know what I
Right.
mean? It's just like, put it out of the box and go. Whereas, it's that attention to detail that makes you a professional. But going back to ego, I love what you said there. I don't class myself as being the world's best drone pilot. Very far from it. I got to meet so many wonderful drone pilots, over the years. When we were doing promotional shots, we even had Captain Vanover, the FPV pilot, um, you know, fly around the aircraft, do these amazing things. It's amazing. These guys have so much skill. But it reminds me, going back, I did my crew resource management and human factors training with a former Vietnam pilot who was an amazing advocate for aviation safety. And he said, I came home with a new mug, and the wife commented on it. I said, "Well, what's on the mug?" It said, "World's second best helicopter pilot." And I said, well, why did it say world's second best helicopter pilot? He goes, well, everyone's the world's first best. So that spot was wide open. And
Yeah.
I kind of like that because aviation, it doesn't matter what sector of aviation you're in, whether it's UAS, fixed wing, helicopters, there is a lot of type A personalities. There's a lot of egos.
Hmm.
And, when it comes to flying, it doesn't matter what you're flying, check your ego at the door. As a flight instructor, they give you the long list of traits to look out for in people. And yeah, I think we all have to remain humble. And like you said, if someone's up flying and they're doing something, you want to talk to them when they've got the aircraft back on the ground. And yeah, staying humble. We're all learning at different rates, but we can all learn from each other. And that's one of the reasons I love the chapters that we both work with, where we can
Right.
share information. I get to chat with my buddy on a podcast, and we get to
There you
talk
go.
around stupid
Yeah.
things we've done in the past, and
Yeah.
things that we see out there, and share, because that's where the benefit is it's sharing information, things we see, things we may have done, or things we never want to do.
Oh, exactly. And I'm actually running into a brand new challenge that I never expected. And that is I have had, I haven't, I used to do a lot more flying for clients.
Mhm.
And now that I'm moving into consulting and education, I haven't flown as much as I used to. And so those skills, I'm having to revert back to my materials to, do the hover check and make sure that, my pre-flights are all taken care of. It is, I think the one thing that has really stood out to me is that it is a lot more challenging to do it right than people realize. They
Yeah.
feel like they can buy a drone, they can stick it up, and, the drone will tell them whether or not they're in the right airspace to fly. Or the drone will will have features on it that won't allow them to do stupid things. But no, it's, my concern is with the pilots.
Yeah.
And as I have not flown as frequently as I used to, I do see challenges in just getting it back out there again and making sure that I run through all the systems the way that I used to. So it's I have to carry my checklist, make sure that I'm doing
And,
it.
being a helicopter pilot, I'm just so used to having that checklist, and if I don't have one, I'm kind of, I think that was always, it's a challenge for a lot of organizations where, say a Part 135 organization that's flying tours, for example, or businessmen around, the requirement is that the pilot has a checklist, and they go through the checklists. Does that mean that I've flown that aircraft for thousands of hours? I know how to start that thing I could start it with my eyes closed,
Wow.
click, 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 and the thing will start up. But it's that one time when you're fatigued, or your your aircraft's down for maintenance, you jump in the other one, which is close but not quite, and the switches are in different positions, or um, things like that. And so I forced myself to go through that checklist, use a checklist for drones. I keep it in the box. So I make sure it's kept up to date, especially when you do firmware updates and things like that. People forget about
Yep.
that. The checklist from 3 years ago there's probably a lot of stuff on there that doesn't doesn't still ring true. But no, again, another step in professionalism, I think, is doing that. But you, I have exactly the same problem you do. I don't fly as much anymore either, and so um, in the crewed world, we have those personal minimums, safety minimums, and so now my minimums have gone up. Right, so before I could land in a smaller spot. Now I give myself more room on all sides. I'm a lot more hesitant about where I take off and land from, and the maneuvers I might do. Um, you're still going through that checklist, that risk assessment in your mind before you take off, what you're going to do in case of an emergency, and those things. But I think that's a good viewpoint to have, right? You've identified this immediately, that hey, I'm not as sharp as I was, 2 months ago. I'm going to give myself a bit more space and a bit more leeway.
It's interesting, when you got to your highest skill as a drone pilot or as a helicopter pilot, it's amazing how far away you are from that now. And I'm
Mhm.
not saying you're not, it's just that there are levels of confidence and levels of experience that you were carrying in, that you were like, okay, I've done this 1,000 times. The drone is operating great today, and I've got a clear airspace, and I know I can get, you know, really close to the subject if I need to. Whereas now it's like, oh my gosh, I remember there were wind shears off of that tree over there, and I've got to be a little bit more cautious on that. Uh, so I'm finding myself flying a little bit further away, and then as I gain the confidence, I'll end up closer to my subjects. But with the drones today, with the cameras, oh my gosh, with the zoom, you're on top of it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, and I tell you what, I was an anxious pilot when I started to fly, crewed aircraft. But the first time I got behind the controls of a Wingcopter 198 eVTOL drone that was, geez, I don't know, $100,000, and I had to do emergency procedures, I was sweating more than ever before. Like, forget the helicopter. I was more worried about this aircraft that's flying, that you had to turn all the automation off and fly it manually like a RC plane for the emergency procedure to get to the ground. No, I think going back, training on emergency procedures, and I think a lot of times we're so used to the fun element of drones and just be able to go up and fly whatever. We sometimes fly without purpose. If you're doing a mission, you're doing a photo mission or whatever on the house, whenever we get the drone, we don't have a mission. We just mess around and have fun. But
Right.
I like to at least dedicate some time to be, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I've got the opportunity now. Let's try flying it in full manual mode without stabilization, in case the autopilot does something wacky, that I have that ability. I haven't done that in a while. Those kind of things. Setting yourself up a bit of a program of continuous training. And then maybe next week I'm going to do some other maneuver that I haven't done in a while, or some other procedure.
Well, one of the more interesting operations I ever had was I filmed an island. And so I was going to be on a boat. And so to train for the boat, I was actually trying to sit between myself and where the console would be, bring the drone down and try to land, within 2 feet of myself on a
Mhm.
consistent basis. That took about 2 full days of just it wasn't that I wasn't able to do it. It was just to do it and feel confident that if we caught a little gust, or a wave hit the boat, or maybe a little current started to shift it. And I ran into every one of those scenarios when I was on the water,
Mhm.
because, boats are not stationary. And so you're bringing a drone down and you're like, please, can you telling the captain, hold it steady, and try to land on a small, man, it's about a 2 by 2 space. It can be quite challenging,
Oh yeah,
but
absolutely.
it goes into the training, uh, and before any operation, I'll go out there and I'll bleed 3, 4 batteries, just making sure that I can land, take off. I can set it in the course that it needs to go. All the motors sound good. The batteries are holding their charges. The controller's holding its charge. There's so much to think about in these flights. So,
So I know that you said, you're having less time on the sticks now, and
yeah.
you're starting this new consulting venture. How does that look like? You decide to go that direction. What are your first steps now into consulting? How's that working out?
Well,
What's the steps forward you've got planned?
for me, I actually didn't understand what consulting was, and but I knew that that was the direction I was headed in. And so I want to not only make sure I'm moving into compliance and training. So I want to make sure that the people that hire the pilots know what the pilots need to have, such as their registration, certifications, authorizations, uh, anything that's required for what they do, or they understand that the pilot needs to be able to furnish these uh, documents to state that they can fly, and for the pilots to be aware. One of the things that I see happening to pilots happen to be the recurrent training. Every 24 months, you're supposed to do recurrent training. And yet, I let it lapse for about a month, 2 years ago, just because it was just one of those things that just kind of crept up on me. So,
And especially when operational paces, pick up. So suddenly work gets real busy, and
mhm.
when you're not checking it all the time, these dates tend to slip. It's a common thing I see when I'm going out to see organizations.
Well, and the other thing I see is logbooks. I've fallen guilty for this. The drones that I have log books in them, and so it's a digital log. But what I have heard is that if you have an accident and you don't have a logbook, they'll take your phone or your iPad or whatever you're using for your flights, and that could be taken away from you because they are the ones that's what contains your logbook. So it's and when it comes to logbooks, that never shows you what your environmental conditions were, how high what your KP index, or the clouds, or the winds, or what your situation was when you were out there on site. And so I'm working, trying to get to a point to where when I go to these companies, I'm trying to help them with their standard operating procedures, operations manuals, compliance, making sure they know all the pilots are up to date, all the drones are registered, everything that we do on, normally but there's such a disconnect with the industry. I see it as a huge opportunity.
Yeah,
So,
and I think most people don't understand those requirements either. Um, it's funny. Sorry, you got my mind spinning when you talked about logbooks. I'm from the generation. I've still got a hardbound logbook I used to write all my hours into.
yeah,
For flying, and that was a big thing when I came across to UAS. It was none of that's around anymore. I used to
right.
religiously write my best handwriting in my logbook and log all my hours. And,
Yeah,
for the crewed side, it was logging solo time, night time, cross country time. And you were desperate about getting these hours, right? Oh, but then my next employer is going to be, I need to get more night hours. I need to fly more at night, and all this. You
right.
get so obsessive about it. But yeah, in the uncrewed world, some people don't even bother logging anything. They don't even
No,
use the automated system, that's part of their drone setup. It's
not
kind
at
of wild.
all.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's funny in the drone industry. One of the things I love to ask any drone pilot is, tell me anything that's happened. Have you ever had a problem in flying a drone? And if they come to me and they say no, I know they don't fly, because it's constant with like an SD card, or it could be the charging of the battery, or charging of the remote control, or something like birds showed up or people were walking around. There's always something that we're having to deal with. And so, I think that's where these logbooks can really come in handy, because as an educator, I've started to write down stories of things that have happened. And those are basically taking the logs of what I've done on those operations. And I'll tell you this, you write down some of the problems that you've had, and it's like you've embedded that into your mind that you're not going to let that happen again. And so I've become a better pilot because of the logbooks. But yes, I still write down stuff. I just haven't found a good do you have a recommendation for logbooks? Something
You mean
that
digital or like in the book format?
digital. I know the book formats, yeah,
I
but
you see you see I'm old school. I
yeah,
I they talk about all these generations, your Gen Z and Gen X. So I
yeah.
was born 1980. That's dating me now, right? So what generation is that? Because I'm one of those ones who I embrace technology, but I'm also aware that it can fail you miserably and I'd lose all my hours if I put them online. So is that Gen X? I'm not sure.
I don't know. I don't know. You could be a millennial for all I know. I don't know. No, I doubt that.
You know, there's a few out there, like, we used to use, I'm trying to think of the names now. There's Drone Logbook was one of them. Obviously, I'm not endorsing any of these, but
Right.
but we use that one a lot because the scheduling and this it linked into our flight data and things like that. There's a few options
Right.
out there. It might be good to revisit those actually. But like I said, it's so easy to get kind of a little complacent because it's part of the software that runs your drone, to use what's already there. But if you're not diligently making backups and you know, that's your complete flight history there. You know,
Right.
if my hardback book disappeared, at least you know, you can go back to the last hours that you submitted to the FAA for your last, you know, check ride or whatever. You can go back to there, but UAS is like nothing for that. So
No,
that's a good
I've
point to
been
take away from this. You know, backing up your flight hours.
well, that's the one thing, the Part 107 does not train anybody how to fly a drone. It's how to operate in the airspace, or maybe crew management, or maybe how to take care of yourself. Don't have the ego, or don't try to rush something to get it done. But as far as flight, I'll tell you, I have flown with people that are just absolutely brilliant. It's almost as if they were born to have the sticks in their hand. And then I've
Mhm.
flown with others that, oh my gosh, there's no way I'll ever want them to touch my drone. So it's like everything in this world. There are things that you can be good at and there are things that you can't, but you kind of got to know your limitations when it comes to some of these pieces of equipment. So I'm hoping that eventually we will have some sort of flight standards that will go along with UAS technologies, because I think it's needed.
Yeah, I totally agree. But again, as we're both educators, I think,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of this falls on us too, right? And it,
Yeah.
again, I love these kind of conversations where we can talk and we can kind of identify areas that we need to focus on as educators, as an industry, you know, and where we can support more. I mean, I see we're coming up already on time here. This has been a great conversation, Lamar. Hopefully we can do it again. So if people want to get in touch with you, what's your web address?
Uh, it's Drone Education Services. And look it up online. LinkedIn, I love using that. Lamar Ellis at LinkedIn. And as a matter of fact, that's kind of how we keep in touch, is through LinkedIn an awful lot. I do have email address. I'll give that to you later so that you could put it, I guess, in the brief description of this. But
Yep, somebody.
I will say this. I love what I do. I love the industry, and I want to help the industry out. If anybody has any kind of questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. I want us to have a robust and successful environment to fly in. So if I can help impact that or change that for people to fly safer, I'm all in, as you are yourself. So I'm looking for the next time that we can get together and maybe carry the conversation on a little further again.
Absolutely. I couldn't say it better myself. Fantastic words to end on. Thanks so much, Lamar. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt. It's always good to see you, and I will be talking soon, I'm sure.